"I don't talk much, sir, but I can cook," whispered the timid young woman, her eyes lowered as though every syllable cost her a secret piece of courage, and though the crowded camp of weathered warriors barely noticed her presence, one man did, the towering Apache giant whose silence was even heavier than hers, for he had fought battles, carried scars, and learned to wear stillness like armor. Yet something in the softness of her trembling voice stirred in him an ache he thought long buried, and in that moment their fates, though neither of them yet knew, began to twist together like roots reaching for the same hidden water. She had been abandoned at birth, raised on scraps of kindness from strangers, her only gift the patient art of cooking learned while serving in distant households where she never spoke more than necessity required, because words for her felt dangerous, fragile things that others used carelessly but she guarded like precious pearls, and so people mocked her silence, overlooked her, called her strange, but in the secret world of her kitchen fires, she created meals that told the story she could not say, flavors that carried comfort to the grieving and strength to the weary, and though no one clapped for her, she kept cooking, believing perhaps one day someone would taste her food and hear the language her lips could not form. The Apache giant, on the other hand, was known not for kindness but for the thunder of his presence, a protector of his people, feared by enemies and even by his own tribe, for he was a man of great size and power, and though he rarely spoke, when he did, his words cut through the air like arrows, and so the others assumed his heart was stone, but in truth it beat with a longing he dared not confess, that he was tired of war, weary of loneliness, and searching for a reason to believe that gentleness could exist in a world soaked with hardship. When she first arrived at the camp, carrying nothing but a small sack of herbs and a pot blackened by years of use, the children laughed at her quietness and the women whispered that she would not last, but the giant watched as she gathered firewood without complaint, as she rose before dawn to grind corn, as she shared the best portion of every dish with the elders before serving herself, and he began to notice that though she spoke little, the entire camp grew calmer in her presence, for her food healed not only hunger but spirits, and the aroma of her meals drifted through the cold desert nights like a hymn. One evening, when a storm raged across the plains and the people huddled for warmth, she prepared a stew from the last of the provisions, stretching it with roots she had foraged, and when the giant tasted it, he felt tears sting his eyes. Not because it was grand, but because it carried the taste of home, of love, of something he had not felt since his mother's hands once fed him, and he realized then that this silent girl had given him more with one bowl of stew than all his victories had ever granted, yet still she kept her head down, afraid to be seen, until one night he approached her by the fire where she worked alone, and in a voice softer than any had ever heard from him, he whispered, "I picked you as my wife," and the words startled her so much she nearly dropped the ladle, for never in her quietest dreams had she thought herself worthy of such notice, let alone chosen by a man whose shadow seemed larger than the mountains. But as she looked up at him with wide, trembling eyes, she saw not the warrior the world feared, but a lonely soul like hers, yearning for someone who understood the language beyond words. At first she wanted to refuse, for fear whispered that she was too small, too voiceless, too unworthy, yet when she saw the sincerity burning in his eyes, she felt a courage she had never known rise within her, and though she did not speak, she placed her hand over his rough and scarred from years of battle, and in that simple gesture, she accepted. Their union was met with surprise, even doubt, for what could a giant warrior and a silent cook possibly share? Yet time proved them wrong, for together they built a home where silence was not emptiness but peace, where meals became prayers of gratitude, and where laughter, though rare at first, began to bloom like wildflowers in spring. She learned that her silence was not weakness but strength, for through it she had sharpened the language of compassion, and he discovered that his sighs, once used only for battle, was now a shield for the one who gave him reason to live gently, and when others came hungry, they fed them, when orphans cried, they held them, and soon their small fire became a place of refuge for many, a living reminder that love is not born from words or appearances, but from acts of quiet faith. Years later, when the people spoke of them, they did not call her strange or fearsome, but they said, "There was once a woman who healed with food and a warrior who learned to be tender, and together they taught us that greatness is not in how loud you speak or how strong you appear, but in how much kindness you leave behind." And as she lay beside him in the twilight of their lives, her hair silver like moonlight, he whispered once more, "I picked you, and I would pick you again," and though she never spoke much, her tears spoke louder than any vow, reminding us all that sometimes the most profound love stories are not written in grand speeches, but in quiet acts of giving, in the courage to be gentle, and in the miracle of two broken souls choosing each other. And that is why when we hear her words, "I don't talk much, sir, but I can cook," we understand they were never about food alone, but about love that nourishes, heals, and transforms even the fiercest of giants into a man who whispers not with power, but with tenderness, leaving behind a legacy of hope that even in silence, one can speak louder than thunder.